consciousness is actually the most highly developed process of spiritual realization. It is actually the culmination of the progressive realization of highly developed sages throughout time. For instance, Vyasadeva. If we just consider Srila Vyasadeva, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa. Vyasadeva, Veda Vyas, this is actually a position. It refers to the one who is appointed by Krishna to assimilate the Vedic knowledge and edit it in such a way that all the different departments are very clearly set out one after another. In the beginning, the Vedic knowledge is just one knowledge, one huge mass of knowledge. And no one person knew it either. No one person could say he knew all the Vedic knowledge. It was known by all kinds of great sages who knew his specialty here, his specialty there, their specialty there. Therefore, it was kind of spread out. And if you wanted to learn different subject matters, you would approach different rishis or sages and they would tell you. So, Vedavyas had the big job of taking all of that and somehow systemizing it. Systemizing it in a certain way in which it became consistent in each department. In other words, he knew something, and then he knew something else, and then the other person knew something that fit in between, and another person knew something that fit over there, and in this way it was very huge. And that didn't matter to the people of that time, because they could understand that. They could understand how the knowledge was actually working very consistently. For an intelligent person, you can jump all over the place and just give bits and pieces, and his intelligence is so good that he can fill in all the spaces. Thus conversations become very short. I remember having conversations with Srila Prabhupada where I would say something after only about 30 seconds. And that would be after jumping at least 10 miles on the mental platform from step to step. And he would be right ahead with the next point already ready and bringing you on to the next point. So when you're dealing with very intelligent people, there's no need to have to go through every intermediary step to bring a point from its beginning to its conclusion. But because we are in the age of Kali, and everybody in the age of Kali is less intelligent, that's one of the symptoms of the age of Kali, Vyasadeva took all that knowledge and he placed it in a certain way so that even we fools can understand it. And furthermore, he also, besides doing such a huge work, such a big work this was, besides doing all that huge work, you can just imagine how long it must have taken to do all of that. He also composed the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is over 200,000 verses. Bhagavatam, such a big book, yes, is only 18,000 verses. That was also written by Vyasadeva. 18,000 verses. Short. The Mahabharata is more than 10 times bigger. And not only was he writing such a book, but he spoke it many times. The whole thing. And at other times he spoke portions of it too. At the same time he edited all the Vedas. And at the same time he wrote the Vedanta Sutra, which is the most incredible book where you can't even understand one verse without a full commentary. And how the commentators understood it, I'll never know. It is just simply the most incredibly concise text, yet the commentators have understood it and reaped great meaning out of it. And further he went on to give the commentary on Vedanta Sutra Srimad Bhagavatam. Such a big work was done. And he was all the time just progressively giving out the knowledge as he was realizing it. And throughout the history, this was going on. Great personalities would expand this Vedic knowledge more and more to make it more and more clear for the less intelligent. And certainly Lord Chaitanya, he was making it such a way that even anybody could understand through the kirtan, through the chanting process. The whole fruit of love of Godhead became apparent. And from him the 6 Goswamis expanded that even more. And then the other Acaryas who came down the line, they all in their own way expanded that more. And right up to the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who not only expanded it, but synthesized it with the Western tradition. That further went on through Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and certainly Srila Prabhupada was the prime mover of Krishna consciousness to the West. We are trying in some little humble way to further go in that line of synthesis to bring Krishna consciousness more into the mind's relevancy of the modern life. So, this progressive march, taking this essential knowledge and expanding it further and further for the benefit of the people of the time. This is a tradition in Krishna consciousness movement. And therefore, we of this movement follow this tradition very carefully, trying to further expand, further enlighten, further bring this very ancient knowledge into the light of the modern times. Or should I say, bringing the light of this great Vedic knowledge into the darkness of the modern times. Depends on how you see the word light. So, this process of bringing new people into Krishna consciousness, this is very important part of the tradition. To bring some souls to the platform of accepting on the absolute platform the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Lord, and that we are His servant, and that we are meant to surrender to the spiritual master who is the product of this great progressive tradition coming down through time. Actually, we very much ascribe our understanding and our philosophy to Lord Chaitanya, because we are not Vedantists by any means. We are not just followers of dry philosophy. Vedanta is not dry, but they've turned it into something dry, especially Shankaracharya. By necessity, he turned Vedanta into something very dry in order to capture the dry minds of the Buddhist class of men. So, this tradition was really smashed to pieces by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He just destroyed this whole dry thing. Voidism is dry. Oneism is dry. Monism is just oneism. It's dry. Lord Chaitanya actually put juice back into the whole process. And therefore today, in Krishna consciousness, we have a very nice synthesis between a very scholarly tradition and a very joyous tradition. Formerly they used to consider the Vaishnavas were emotionalists. The Babajis in Navadvip, they used to just sit under the tree and chant their japa all day. And they didn't study any philosophy. Of course, if they were challenged, if some fool were foolish enough to come along and try to challenge them, they could smash him to pieces with philosophy. There's no doubt. But they didn't bother with philosophy, because they were already far beyond the platform of philosophy. They were already totally realized in their natural constitutional positions. Just like the gopis, they didn't bother with philosophy. Although if the gopis ever wanted to become philosophical, they would speak the most advanced philosophy of all. But they have already gone far beyond the platform of philosophical understanding because they were already realized. They were living the philosophy. They were living the essence of the philosophy. And these Babajis were all Paramahamsas. The tradition in those days was simply carried on by Paramahamsas. Either you were a Paramahamsa or you were in the Grihastha ashram, living normal life. Maybe pious man, but you weren't qualified to sit under the tree with the Babajis. Because you had to be a Paramahamsa. You had to be already realized who you were and fully engaged in your spiritual service to the Lord. Then you could sit under the tree and chant with them. Otherwise, they didn't want you. Unless you were going to do that, they didn't want you around. You were just a disturbance. And they certainly didn't want to wrangle over philosophical points. They were not wranglers, taking points and just twisting them and arguing about them and bringing arguments up and countering them. And this was just a waste of time. They were already fully realized, so they just were acting on that platform, that's all. So the mundaners, they saw this, and they said, these are just emotionalists. Just look at them, sitting there crying and doing other things, rolling on the ground in ecstasies. And they were saying, look at us, we're great scholars. We read the books, we study. We can philosophize, we can speculate. We're so marvelous. They're so foolish. So people had the idea that these great Paramahamsas, they were simply emotionalists. So they labeled the Gaudiya Vaishnavism as emotional thing. They said it was meant for old men and women. See, because they saw old men sitting there, because generally, as long as one is young, he's filled with so many desires, he can't sit under the tree and just chant on the Paramahamsa platform. So it was generally the older ones who were doing it, because they'd given up all of this materialism. So they were doing it. Therefore, everybody said it was for old men. And wherever there's old men, they also throw in women too. Because they saw in Vrindavan the old, how do you say, Babajinis? You don't say, I'm just making that up. They go around chanting, all bent over, chanting, circumambulating the temples, going Jai Radhe, things like that. So, therefore they would label Gaudiya Vaishnavism in that way. And anybody who's really serious about philosophy, he was considered the real scholar, the real learned one in the philosophy of Vedanta or Krishna consciousness. So, there was this dichotomy that had been created between knowledge, so-called knowledge, dry knowledge, and emotionalism. You see. And there were others who just rejected both of it and said it's both useless. Here we've got these emotionalists, they're just sitting there crying, that's all useless. And then we've got here these dry scholars just busy speculating on Cracker's philosophy. That's also useless. That nobody's getting any taste on either of these, they say. One is sentiment and one is speculation. So they use this as an excuse to give up everything and don't bother with any religious idea or spiritual idea. In this way, the rascaldom was expanding. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there was this one scholar. I had known this before, but I just read an article in Back to Godhead about him. That Bhaktivinoda Thakur is becoming the big topic of discussion amongst the scholars in America, who finally woke up to the fact that before Vivekananda was speaking his nonsense garbage, there was a great personality who was delivering lectures which were knocking everybody right over, and who was speaking in such fluent English that nobody could imagine, and who was a highly educated and learned man who knew everything about all the philosophers of the Western world, who knew everything about Christianity as well, who was also an expert in the Mohammedan languages, Urdu and Persian. He knew everything about all this and still was a great scholar of the Vedic literature, and at the same time was fully able to walk into the class of the Paramahamsa Babajis and sit right down and make himself right at home. and who furthermore discovered the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and at the same time was a magistrate who worked so many hours a day, and at the same time, while he was a magistrate doing all of these things, was writing 100 books and raising 13 children. So they just caught on to the fact that this sampradaya has got supermen in it. Because they can't imagine doing that. They can't imagine raising more than one child, two child. Maybe if you're really good, you might get up to 4, but 13 out of the question. And at the same time being a magistrate all day and writing 100 books, ridiculous. And finding Lord Chaitanya's birthplace and doing so many other things. Going door to door, collecting 1 rupee at every door and building Lord Chaitanya's temple. Just an amazing personality. So they're beginning to understand that this Krishna consciousness is coming from a very, very great tradition. And especially they appreciate, because they still don't have really the greatest knowledge. Of course, it is good to appreciate. We're not knocking that. But also there are very, very great personalities before Bhaktivinoda Thakur who they are yet to discover also. Like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev Bijabhushan, Narottam Das Thakur. Such incredible personalities also. The whole disciplic succession is simply filled with incredible personalities. Because in our disciplic succession, it is not exactly a Diksha Guru succession, it's a Shiksha Guru succession. In other words, if you are a Mahabhagavata, in other words, if you were the greatest personality of the times, then you were qualified to be in our disciplic succession. If you were giving shiksha or instruction to the following Acharya. Just like Jagannath Das Babaji was the great Paramahamsa, the leader of the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava community, and he was the one who told Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you have got a good brain and good understanding. You should bring Krishna consciousness to these Western peoples and let them know exactly how wonderful it is. And thus he became the Shiksha Guru of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And therefore he is in our disciplic succession in this way. It is not just because you get some beads or some thread or some name that all of a sudden the disciplic succession is established. No. It is established by the Mahabhagavatas, or incredible personalities, supermen, the real supermen, the real personalities who do things which nobody else can imagine, how wonderful they are. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur delivered this knowledge in a perfectly synthesized fashion that just is right for the Western mind. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he took up the mission of Bhaktivinoda Thakur to get an army of preachers together. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he didn't gather his army. He was busy writing the rule books for the army. He was busy writing the books which the army would use. He was busy preaching to establish the respectability of this army of Krishna conscious men. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he established the army. Enormous amount of people, 60,000 he accumulated in the Gaudiya Math, which he established. Started with nothing. And then he established such a huge preaching mission throughout India, going everywhere, making huge parikrams, preaching programs. Nobody would argue with him. They would run in fear. They were so afraid of his arguments. He would just so smash them to pieces on every platform. Nobody could stand before him. All philosophies destroyed. But after his disappearance, because he was such an extraordinary Superman, there was nobody to replace him for some time. For some time there was a gap in the tradition. And during that gap, which lasted for about 30 years, during that time gap, the whole tradition collapsed. Not entirely. There were some remnants there. But the whole thing fell down because of the lack of the Superman. Because in the Kali Yuga, without Supermen, you can't hold up this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. Because everybody is so degraded. Things are falling down so fast. There was so many prejudice from caste Brahmins, from Smarta Brahmins, from Mayavadis. The Ramakrishna mission then became very powerful. The Ramakrishna mission was nothing at the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. By his preaching, he destroyed them to nothing. They had no followers, just a couple little huts here and there. But after his disappearance, because his disciples didn't take up the mission, or at least because most of them didn't take up the mission properly and cooperate as he wanted, then the Ramakrishna mission became very powerful. Very powerful. And all of this nonsense gradually began to overwhelm. And especially amongst the scholars of the West, who just started to get into the tradition, it started to become a respected disciplinary activity, they lost the idea of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Until Srila Prabhupada came, and Srila Prabhupada established this Krishna consciousness movement and wrote all of these wonderful books, that people start understanding that, wait a minute, there are supermen in this disciplic succession. Because Srila Prabhupada, still an unbroken chain of succession, was the following Superman who hadn't yet revealed himself, or who Krishna was waiting for the right time to establish him in the Western world in such a way that Krishna consciousness would become firmly fixed in the history of the world. Prabhupada's mission wasn't just the kind of a mission which lasted for some time and then was finished. No. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, when he created this army, he created one general also. But the general realized, was instructed, you take your domain, you make your domain in the Western world. And you go there, and you establish this Krishna consciousness. And by the influence of Krishna, the time was ripe, he came and did it, and therefore is the perfect follower, the perfect following Superman in the disciplic succession of real Supermen. Real Superman, not just somebody who does some tricks, but a real wonderful personality. Of course, we can go on praising Srila Prabhupada all day. That we like to do very much. But the whole point is that this process which we are performing actually depends on the creation of Supermen. So, we're happy when people take up Krishna consciousness and become initiated into Krishna consciousness. But we're more happy when somebody becomes qualified to take up the Superman status. You see, that is the real purpose of all of this preaching, to create Supermen. Of course, we'd be fully satisfied to create one Superman, because that one Superman will bring us back to Godhead as well. But we'd be really satisfied if there were many Supermen. This we'd be very much satisfied with. Therefore, one should not just be satisfied just doing his service in whatever way he gets away with. If he gets away with doing so much service, okay, good enough. If nobody gets on his case and tries to, starts to beat him in different ways, all right, if I just avoid, if I can just avoid somehow or another being chastised or whatever, if I do just enough to satisfy, that's okay. No. That's not okay. That's not our tradition either. Our tradition is that we get Supermen here. We get the greatest men. That's our tradition. And if we don't do this, then we're not following in our tradition. And we want to follow in this tradition. We want to follow in this tradition and get very, very, very great personalities taking up Krishna consciousness, spreading Krishna consciousness, preaching Krishna consciousness, delivering Krishna consciousness in such a way that people will understand it is not just a bunch of sentimentality. Neither is it just dry philosophy, but it is the perfect synthesis between real love of Godhead and real knowledge. This is required. We have to have a class of devotees who know perfectly well how to establish Krishna consciousness like that. How to show it's the real ecstatic love of Godhead and the real perfect first-class philosophy of all philosophy. That must be there by the personal example of these supermen. Super devotees. Devotees who are absolutely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of God and absolutely fixed in loving devotion to the Lord. Now Lord Chaitanya, he ordered all Indians to do that. He said all the Indians, they must take up this mission. That I declare it as the duty and responsibility of every person to do it. But especially those who are born in the Bharatvarsha, where they have such a clear opportunity to do it. But they don't do it. Therefore, Prabhupada, he's making us do it. And therefore, in this tradition, it should go on. Of course, it is not surprising, because Prabhupada hints in many places, not even hints, he says it quite frankly, that the Aryans are the ones who moved to the European countries, and then further on to America. The Aryans are the knowers of the Vedic principles, who take it up very quickly, and who very strongly establish Krishna consciousness. Aryan class. So that Aryan class was the Kshatriya class, and they were driven out by Lord Parshuram. He hated Kshatriyas, because they're always making trouble for people, especially the Brahminical class at that time. So he drove them out with his chopper. He killed all the Kshatriyas so many times. The ones who were left, they ran away in fear to Europe. And they established these European countries, these European communities. These European communities were established because of Lord Parshuram's acts. So Prabhupada said that tradition of Aryanism, or the culture, the genealogical heritage, that comes in these modern countries, these Western countries, Europe, these European countries. These are the real Aryans. Because, he said, the proof is just see how quickly they take up Krishna consciousness and how seriously. Whereas in India, the preaching is very difficult because people are so much lazy in this idea. They're so much eager for Western advancement, Western technology, Western development. They're enamored by these things. So he said the Aryans, they moved to the West. But we will prove Srila Prabhupada wrong if we don't become the Superman Aryan who used to really make sure this world was Krishna conscious, like Arjuna, Yudhisthira, Bhima. These very great Maharaj Parikshit, these great personalities. So in other words, right now we're trying to just encourage some to become great personalities. The heritage is there. The culture is there. The tradition is there for greatness. That's what Prabhupada used to say all the time. What is the use? He used to say it about Americans because, anyway, we were around at that time. He might have said it about others. But he used to say, what is the use of you being American if you can't do something wonderful? He used to challenge like that. Now what is the use? So what? If you don't do something wonderful. In other words, don't sit back and rest on your laurels. Oh, you're such a great person. No. You become great by doing something great. And that goes for everybody. Just like Hitler used to tell all the Germans that they were the super race. They were the real Aryans. They were the supermensch. But the world looks and says, but what did you do that was so great? All you did was cause some trouble and you had to get smashed. So, by the results, you judge by the results. You see? You can't just proclaim yourself great. Just like in Sweden, they proclaim themselves great. Great liberalists, great intelligent persons, great organizers of society. But what is the result? What is the proof? The proof is you've got a mess right now and it's getting worse. So you cannot just proclaim yourself great and rest on these laurels and expect everybody will bow down before you. That's what happens to every decadent civilization. It's like the Romans. Every civilization like that. The British also. Whatever great empire was there. The Romans, they were becoming very decadent. Simply just enjoying in any way they could. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending became the whole goal. You know the story of Nero fiddling while Rome burns? And the barbarians came along and smashed the whole thing to pieces and took it over. That always happens, because barbarians got big muscles. So, when a society thinks it is very great and cultured, and it builds a big empire, it invariably becomes degraded and falls down and conquered by those with the big muscles. In other words, the Sudra class. That is the nature of history, the nature of things. So one cannot rest on his laurels, oh, I am from this nationality, oh, I have this brain in my head. You cannot rest simply on that. You have to do something wonderful. You have to really do something and thus gain that position. Otherwise, if you don't do something and just talk big, talk is cheap. Anybody can talk. Anybody can say, I'm great. Anybody can say, oh, I used to be so great, therefore I'm still great. Anybody can say, I've got the capacity to be great, therefore I'm great. This is all just talk. You're just a nobody until you do something great. And what is that something that's really great? The first most great something is to really distribute Prabhupada's books like anything and produce them like anything. This is the first great something. Those who produce and distribute these books like anything all over the world, they're the first great. There's no doubt about it. Beyond that, or how to say, somewhere close to that in the realm of greatness, are those who are preaching Krishna consciousness directly and organizing so that the book production and book distribution will go on. Of course, sometimes it's very hard to see because one seems greater than the other, and sometimes the positions switch when extraordinary things are done in each department. If you want to know the truth, anybody who's working in that way to produce Krishna consciousness, spread Krishna consciousness, they're all the same great. And maybe some, that's the classes now. We're talking about classes of men. And amongst them, there may be one or two individuals who are super excellent and excel all the others. But anybody who's engaged in that way, to simply spread Krishna consciousness in that way, he's of the great category. Although in all categories, somebody may be especially great, but we're talking about categories now. Although we're not supposed to speak in terms of designation, but this is a parampara designation. Book producers, book distributors, they are a parampara designation as great. Somebody should wake up and turn off his alarm. Then, we wish in this Krishna consciousness movement to have great persons. Persons who are simply eager to spread Krishna consciousness. Simply eager to bring Krishna consciousness to this world. Simply eager to just show the fools of this world why their whole society is breaking down. Why everything is falling to pieces. Why they themselves are falling to pieces. Because they're following blind men. Blind leaders. Therefore they're fools. Someone may say, but I'm very intelligent. Okay. But because you follow a fool, you're a fool. One may proclaim he's a very intelligent scientist. But if he follows Darwin, he's a fool. Or if he follows other materialists who are saying everything comes from chemical interaction and combination, he's a fool. If he says there's no God, there's no controller, why, you ask him? He says because it's just mythology, it's illogical. Then he's a fool. Although he may have a so-called big brain in his head. You know, this Krishna consciousness movement is not for any such common fool. Although he may be designated as Nobel laureate. It is for those who are of the highest category. Highest class of men. Krishna consciousness movement is meant for the Paramahamsa class of men. Now, of course, we're only dealing with the neophytes and a couple who may have the possibility of becoming of the Paramahamsa category. All right. But you should know where you've got to go. No one should think, I'm okay. Where I'm at now is good enough. It's all right, I'll just rest on my laurels, or I'll just do good enough. I'll just give 60% of my energy. That's good enough. I'll just do things until everybody thinks I'm good enough. No. You have to really do something to spread this Krishna conscious movement and really do something great. That is the point. And beyond that, there's no other point. No other point of real interest anyway. Are there any questions? Krishna very mercifully gave us an extra hour today. Specifically on these subject matters. Very little to question about, isn't it? Very clear what has to be done. Now it's just a question of doing it, isn't it? We all begin to realize how lazy we actually are. How we don't really take up very seriously this mission. We're all very lazy. That is our nature. This world makes lazy men. Sit back and relax. Take it easy. You know, in America I was hearing that, and I just was remembering this. People, when they leave each other, they go, "Take it easy." That's a fact. Do they do that in Sweden? Something like that? I don't think so. Yeah? Similar? Take it easy. When I was listening, take it easy. Then I started saying to devotees, I said, take it hard. They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, everybody's saying take it easy, but I thought, take it hard. Anyway. All right, so I guess we have to give some names now. Prabhupada once said, in the case of already liberated souls, there's no need for initiation. So, but generally we are not dealing with liberated souls. We are dealing with the conditioned variety. Therefore we initiate. Already liberated souls, they also take initiation, as if they needed it. Lord Chaitanya also took initiation. And then he initiated his spiritual master. When Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, he actually initiated his spiritual master first. Because he asked him, he said, I know one mantra, which is supposed to be the sannyas mantra. I know one mantra. Do you mind if I tell it to you and you can confirm whether it's right or not? So Ishvara Puri, being very intelligent, said, oh yes. So he spoke him that mantra and initiated the spiritual master. Then after the spiritual master was initiated, he initiated Lord Chaitanya. But this only happens when you're God. Mm-hmm. All right. So who's first over there? Bhakta Lash? No, you should go the other way. Get yourself up and turn. All right. we always put our head towards Prabhupada, not the feet. So what are the 4 rules?
No sex, no masturbation, no dancing, no intoxication.
And how many rounds every day? And what else? Okay, what else? Oh, rascals. What are you doing? Have you no brains? I'm calling you all rascals and you insist? No brains, no intelligence whatsoever. Play games? I'm asking him. I'm not asking anybody in the audience. Why? Why should you disturb books? Tell me.
To make the people understand the necessity of spiritual life.
How did the books do that?
They inform people on the way to go.
Just inform them?
They teach the way.
What's the special nature of these books that make them different than other books that also teach? Yeah, but there's something very special about them. Is there something special about these books or not?
Yes.
So what is it about these books that are special? List them off.
Spiritual.
What? So how do you know that?
By reading them and at the same time supporting devotional service.
Yes, they give you realization. How can they give you? Why do they give you realization?
If you're at the same time executing devotional service.
No, but why the books give you realization? Now you're explaining to me why the devotional service gives you realization. Why do the books give you realization?
Because they,
You gave one answer, disciplic succession. But more, keep going.
the books are given from Krishna directly.
Yes, and what else? Only Krishna? He came down on his swan airplane and...
No, the spiritual master.
Yes, from Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada has realization. Because Prabhupada is of the Mahabhagavata category. Eternally liberated soul. When he writes, you can get the realization because he imparts the knowledge in your heart. That is the nature of these books. The knowledge is imparted. It is planted. It is stuck in the heart. Otherwise, for you to bring it in, first of all, you hardly have the desire. Second of all, you hardly have the time or ability. People, they're very lazy. Mandus, amanda mateo. They're very lazy. So, these books take this transcendental knowledge and inject it in your heart. Forcibly. Because of the power and potency. So these books are very important because of that. You should know the glories of these books. Because you're going to be distributing them for quite some time. Alright. Your name is Lakshmi Nrsingadas. Self-explanatory. Okay. Eckhart? What are the four regulative principles?
What is the sex and
Right, and how many rounds? Only. Okay. Now you explain to me how your going out there and playing with transistors and chips all day has anything to do with Krishna consciousness. You explain that to me.
well, I mean, we in the studio we are producing this radio plays about Krishna by keeping it in a good shape,
And what is the use of radio plays about Krishna?
people can hear about Krishna. It's very functional situation.
Well, we can also go out in the street and talk to people about Krishna.
Radio, I mean, people just they switch it on and they hear about it.
Well, I mean, you can also just go out and tell them and they can hear it too. What's the difference?
And the radio, it reaches more people.
So what's good about that?
Well, because I mean, it is our aim to get as much people as.
Or we go out and distribute books.
And
And what's the use of these records? Just a bunch of rock and roll.
some people they like that music,
Then what?
but then they gradually become attracted.
To what? Rock and roll?
No,
To what?
to that music that you make.
And what's the difference?
Well, you make spiritual music.
Well, what's so spiritual about it? I mean, you know, I hear drums there and bass guitars and electric. It just seems to me like any other music.
Text,
Yeah.
that kind of
What is about the text that's important?
It's from the Vaishnava.
And so what?
They are glorifying Krishna.
That's all?
They're describing the spiritual life.
That's all? I mean, nobody understands it, so what?
That doesn't matter.
Why?
Because it's a spiritual sound vibration.
What is the same answer he was supposed to give about the books? Because it is coming from those who are Paramahamsa class of men, the message is injected in the heart by the sound vibration alone. Whether you understand it or not, the message is injected in the heart. And when the message is injected in the heart, then you'll start inquiring for yourself, what is the philosophy? It's actually a great psychological trick. When we were just in America, some of the devotees, in America, they never had any experience of Vaishnavas playing this music, especially in public. So at Rath Yatra, myself and Harikesa Maharaj got together and threw together a little band, and we played. And some of the more stodgy members, they were saying, "Oh, what is this? Just a bunch of rock and roll, wasting time." So what happened was we started playing, and everybody stayed who was there. And nobody left, and more people came. And they were just listening. And then afterwards, I gave a lecture, and they all listened very carefully. And the temple president and others, they were just amazed, because generally that never happens. So then I explained that in the modern world, musician is considered the chief, the highest, the top. Of all personalities, if you're a musician, you're more famous than anybody. And if you play music, you're more powerful than anybody, because the philosophy you deliver with your music is accepted as the supreme philosophy, especially amongst the young people. This whole culture, this whole nonsense young people culture, which we're all products of, was started by music. You know that? You know that. was started by music, more than anything else. If you look historically, who changed the world from 1960 on the most? The Beatles. A bunch of complete nonsenses, except for George Harrison. We like him. Prabhupada likes him. He was very helpful. The Beatles. And other personalities, these psychedelia fellows, like the Grateful Dead and all of these ridiculous fellows. Completely ridiculous fellows. No brains in their head whatsoever. You can just go on naming them. One materialist group. They firmly molded the whole shape of the modern society. Their whole revolution, their whole LSD revolution, was going on two fronts. With the babbling of Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey, and the music of the Grateful Dead and others in their like. So, that is a very important point to realize historically. Now Krishna consciousness is going on in two ways. You've got rasa, which seems to be on the surface a very simple thing, but it has a very deep psychological meaning behind it. And you've got this pushing of the new revolution, the Varnashram. Actually, we've been advertising it in America in the following way. We go back and do it again right. You see, a lot of you are younger, but in our generation, the whole thing was, our whole lives were based on this we still have the feeling of 1966, make the revolution, change the society. But everybody gave up because they did it all wrong. So our motto is go back and do it right. You see? We'll go back to the point where we're going to change, but now we're going to do it the right way, with the right music, the right philosophy. Therefore, Naranjana Das, the president of Boston, he came up to me afterwards and he said, the psychology behind this is so deep. Because I never bothered telling anybody about it, because I don't like to defend myself against silly criticisms. I just like people to find out by realization. He said the psychology behind this music is so deep. Because, what do? Played the music and delivered the lecture. And everybody just accepted it. They had no choice. That's a fact. Therefore, we spent all that money to make that studio. Therefore, your job is very important. Otherwise, chips and wires and this and that have no importance. Unless they're for making nice typesetting. Generally, they have no importance. But because now we're using these things for Krishna, they have big importance. Very big importance. The radio is the most important. Do you know revolutions have been made on the radio? Do you know how this man in Bangladesh took over? During the Pakistan, the East Bengal, West Bengal, during that war they had with India, the Indians, they were in there, the Bengali Indians, they were in there fighting, and the man just took over the radio and started proclaiming on the radio that they had won, and that the Indians were packing up and going home. So all the Indians, they heard that, started scratching their heads and said, well, we may as well go home too. And they all went home. And they won the war. You know that? Very powerful. Hitler did that in Austria too, by the way. He went into Austria, took over the radio and said, Austria surrendered, given up everything. Now it is part of the new Reich. And they said, what can we do? We lost. In this way you can do all kinds of things with radio. Prabhupada even made this statement, if we were on TV, this was 10 years ago, he said, if we had gotten on the TV regularly, Krishna consciousness would be spread all over the country already. So we're starting with the radio and then we're moving to the TV gradually. Takes a while, costs a lot of money, but besides that, we're gradually trying to move in these directions. Therefore this radio is very important preaching. Very important preaching. Also for Markandeya here, who I don't have the chance to give a hard time to when he comes up here because he doesn't come up here. But the same is for him. This radio is very important. We shouldn't waste our time. All of the things we are doing there are very important. We should never get lost in our circuitry. Never get lost in those wires and chips. Always keep the consciousness of why we are doing it. Don't get lost in it like the mundaners. They get lost in these things. But make it better and better and better all the time. And then you can also preach very much to the computer class of men. Yesterday I gave a little example how you can preach computer preaching. Computers are great. They lend themselves very nicely to preaching. Because people like to think that they are like computers. That's the whole philosophy, the psychology behind the computer generation. That these are like people. And when you can manipulate and control it, you feel very powerful. Besides that, anyway, that's another subject matter. And electronics, you can preach with electronics. You can also talk to people on the ham radio. So all of these little projects are very important, so take them very seriously. I must say also, our Eckhart is always getting a hard time from me in the recording studio. And he very nicely does it anyway. I'm always yelling at him. So, it's very hard to do that job. It's much easier to be on Sankirtan and just hear lectures on a tape recorder. Than to constantly be getting a club on the head at every moment. Anyway, your name is Ekanath Das. Interesting name, Ekanath, when you think about it. Eka means one. So the Mayavadis, they say everything is one. But if everything is one, then how come there's an Ekanath? How come there's a Lord of one? Did you ever think of that? If everything is one, then there's no question of one who's enough. Or the Lord. But because there's a Lord, he's Ekanath, therefore the one there's also a difference in there. There's a variety in the one. There's a hierarchy, the greater and lower. Ekanath Das refers to the servant of the Supreme One. That's why you're instructing now. I figure the instruction has to start somewhere. So you must learn why you're doing this. Don't take it as just some playing business. This is not good. Gurukul is very important. These children are very important. Sometimes we also play with the kids, but if you notice, we always make them learn something with this playing. We always force them to learn something. That's very important. Every game or every activity should somehow be instructive. So they must learn something. That's very important. Those who are the teachers, and especially those who are just teaching them in everyday life, it is not like there's a duality. There's no duality between directly teaching academically and teaching in the everyday life. It is not like you go out of school and all of a sudden you stop learning. In fact, you learn more out of school than you do in school. I know, I personally never learned anything in school. Of course, I didn't go to the Gurukul. But you never learn anything in school. You just waste your time in school. In the modern school, you waste your time. In Gurukul, you don't waste your time. But in modern school, you simply waste your time. You learn everything outdoor, in the school of hard knocks and experiences. So when those who have the responsibility to take care of children outside of the normal academic thing, I think you're doing that too, yes? You don't? You don't take care of it. You just do inside. Not academic. That's what I'm talking about. Outside means in the academic circle. Inside means in the academic circle. I say outside of the academic circle. That's what I'm talking about. Outside of the academic circle, you learn everything. Basically. That's the way it goes. And especially you learn the attitudes of the teachers. If in the common world they see the teacher smoking cigarettes, so they learn that and they do it themselves. They see, as soon as the teacher has finished the class, he runs into the teacher's room, and as soon as you open the door, they're immediately screaming, shut the door, because you see a cloud of smoke that comes down so far. That is a fact. And therefore they look in and they say, yeah, sure. They're doing it as soon as they get a chance. Well, we'll do it too. And they run into the boys' room and the girls' room, and there's also a cloud of smoke like this. It's a perfect teaching by example. Therefore, you can just imagine, whatever you do, they're watching all the time. Children are very clever. They're watching all the time what you do. They're very sensitive also. They know exactly what you are doing. Because they're very simple. They can't be fooled. You see, anybody else you can fool with big words, although your actions may be a certain way. But kids, they don't have such big brains. They're very clear. They see you acting like a fool, they say, you're a fool. You see, but otherwise, in the material world, you can act like a fool and talk big philosophy, and everybody thinks, well, he's got a very great purpose there. So he can fool everybody. But kids, you can't fool, because they're very simple. A simple person you can never fool. And just like in sports, when you got a big lumbering guy there, like in soccer or something like that, football, and you try to fake him this way, you try to fake him that way, he doesn't go because he's too big and lumbering. He stays right in the middle. Therefore, you're stuck. So kids are like that. You can't fake them out. Of course, you can trick them in little ways if you're a little bit clever, but they catch on to your qualities very quickly. Therefore, the quality of those who work in the Gurukul must be very great. Must be very deep quality. You must know why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing. And then you must learn how to utilize each of these activities to teach them something. Teaching them how to work together, teaching them how to live together, teaching them how to accept each other's qualities, teaching them how to praise others instead of just finding faults. In every game, in every activity, this is very important. So much teaching goes on that platform. So much teaching goes on in that platform. It's not an ordinary thing, it's a very deep thing. These auxiliary activities. But we sometimes take it as an ordinary thing. So next time I ask these questions, you better have full answers, yes? You will? If you don't, I'll find out about it. Okay, your name, I will explain it first. Your name, anyway, I'll give you a name first. Your name is Pajavali Devi Dasi. Now Pajavali there are many meanings to it. But there's also one meaning to it in the way in which it relates to the kirtan. Narottam Das Thakur used to make kirtan in a very special way also. Make a big show, Lila Kirtan, and also Pajavali Kirtan it is called. There's another kind, where they had a great orchestra and used to go around traveling and inspiring everybody in Krishna consciousness in that way. Further, just to show how music is such an integral part of Krishna consciousness, I thought I'd bring that point up. But Pajavali Devi Dasi. Okay. Just keep in mind what I said, please. Very serious points. Generally, I don't talk about the Gurukul so much because that's not really my department. I want to leave it up to Jagadish Prabhu because he's the Minister of Education. And he also likes to do these things very much, to give education on these departments. But I know a little bit about it too. So I thought I'd let Smita Krishna display the knowledge today. So what are the 4 rules? And how many rounds every day? Okay. And it is also a bona fide process for self-realization to every day clean the temple. You know, Lord Chaitanya himself, personally, every year would clean the Gundicha temple. You may have heard that story. Lord Chaitanya used to take the broom, he used to bring all of his devotees into the Gundicha temple, and they used to sweep it. And they used to collect all the dirt in their cloth and make piles. And they used to sweep it again and make a pile. And whoever's pile was the smallest, he had to buy sweets for everybody. And Lord Chaitanya himself, he used to collect the biggest pile. You take everybody's pile, put it together. His pile was bigger. And then after sweeping it all and collecting all the dirt, they used to throw water everywhere and just mop the place and push all the water out. It was like a whole river, ocean, just flowing out the door of the temple. So cleanliness is next to godliness, and it's a very important point. And just by cleaning Krishna's temple, you can go back to Godhead. There's no doubt about it. So your name is Revati Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna. Next is Bhakti Arika didn't come, huh? What should I do? What should I do? She's gonna wait? Or I should just give her a name when she comes? And then she just sits in another fire sacrifice. Alright. So she has a name. But I'm not telling any of you yet. Bhakti Nana? Are you the one who's carving the candles in public? What are you doing now? Selling candles. So mainly you're involved with the candles. That sounds like Maya to me. Just a bunch of wax. What's the use of that? Really? Like what? I see them digging a lot of holes around here. What was that for? You know, you can't imagine what all these things cost. Just so that you can drink water around this place. How much money we have to spend? Don't even ask. A lot of money. Just so you can drink water. And when you drink the water, and whatever water's left over goes down a pipe. And when you flush the toilet or, to run the water in the sink, it goes down a pipe and has to go somewhere. And for it to go somewhere around this place, with so many people as you see in this room, it requires huge tanks and huge systems. You know what that costs? You can't imagine. Everything costs money which you can't imagine. So, in order to spread Krishna consciousness, we need money. Yes, that's a fact. Therefore, we have people going out and selling candles. And if you have that idea, if you understand why you are doing it, then this activity is very transcendental, isn't it? But as soon as you think, I'm selling a bunch of wax, what is the use of that? Then everything falls to pieces. Yes, a candle is a bunch of wax. A candle as such is just a useless thing. I mean, who gets benefit from seeing a candle? Of course, on the other hand, people, when they see such a beautiful candle, they say, look what those Krishna conscious people have done. That's something very unique and nice. They're not just sitting around there in Krishna's God with beads in their hands under a tree, murmuring. They actually do something practical which we like. I mean, they also respect from that platform. But the more important thing is that when you are selling these candles, you are first of all engaging people in Krishna's service. Now explain to me how you benefit them by selling them a candle. And how does their money directly become spiritualized? How do they directly get the benefit? I'm getting more impressed by the second. But I want a specific answer. How specifically when somebody gives a donation on Sankirtan, or Candleton as we call it, how do they get the direct benefit from that? You give me the exact process. I mean, it's a very specific question. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but here, I'm a materialist. I've given you 40 crowns for this candle. Now what happens? He immediately gets the benefit? What happens? How does it happen? No. Even before that. Who knows the answer to this one? It's a tough question. I bet you only the managers know the answer to this one. Maybe I'm not answering the question clear enough. All right, I'll tell you. An unfair question, too complicated. You take the money. You put it in your pocket. You bring the money to the treasurer. You put it on his desk. Sometimes even when he's not there. You must put it when he's there, at least. Anyway, so then he takes the money. He puts it in the bank. Then we take the money out and we use it for a project which is Krishna conscious. Because we take the same donation and it goes directly towards expanding something Krishna conscious, then his donation is directly helping Krishna consciousness. This is a very important fact. This is not just money collecting. We're not collecting money. Anyway, we're not collecting money. We're selling candles. But besides that, it is a direct process of utilization of the money. And the just opposite process works in the material world also. They sell you something. They take the profit and spend it on abominable activities meant to destroy mankind. Therefore, you are instrumental in the destruction and you are responsible. In the same way, opposite, they give money to Krishna consciousness, the profit is going to spreading Krishna consciousness, they gain benefit. Very important points. So your very nice answers have upheld the integrity of the girls' department. After our first inquiries met with a fall flat on the face. That's very good. You should utilize this knowledge to preach too when you get the opportunity. That's very important. If the girls preach and do something nice, then everybody forgets about the fact that by nature they don't have what it takes to become Krishna conscious. Dare I say, less intelligent. But if you preach nicely, everyone forgets that, because then it's no longer true. Now why is it? See, all the girls are very proud of the fact that they are beating the boys in book distribution and other things. Now why is it? Just tell me exactly why on the spiritual platform. Or why, right now, you, who are in a woman's body, which is inferior according to the Vedas, you can't deny it, can you? Is less intelligent according to the Vedas, you can't deny it, can you? Now why is it? You tell me why, in Krishna consciousness, even in this body, you can be equal to or greater than any man. You tell me why. Not important? And then what happens when you become more advanced? You get that mercy. That's okay, but what happens? What is the process? Scientifically speaking. Why is it that it doesn't matter? What happens? And then what happens? That's the don't, what you don't do. What do you do? But what happens? The most important factor that really discriminates between the two. In practice. Ooh, yes. And what does it mean not to act like a mundane woman? Name some of the rotten woman activities you're going to overcome. Yeah, that's one. You're going to overcome not being so serious. You're going to become serious. Mm-hmm. Why not? I'm so rotten. You have to understand these points very carefully. Because somebody will criticize. He'll say, in your literature, it says like this. But then on the other hand, we say there's no difference. Now why? Why? Because when you come to the spiritual platform, it's not like all of a sudden, poof, the woman's body disappears. No. But your intelligence will increase proportionately to your surrender. And the fact of being naturally less intelligent on the physical platform alone will not have anything to do with it. You'll be able to speak philosophy. You'll be able to preach. You'll be able to do wonderful things, just as any devotee is doing. That's a fact, because the intelligence develops. It is not bound by the gray substance up there. By the gray substance up there, it's not, great intelligence is not possible. But one, when he develops Krishna consciously, that intelligence will increase regardless of the body, regardless of the material qualities. Then you can preach very nicely. You gave very good answers. Of course, at the end, wasn't the greatest. But if you keep on learning, you will be able to do that. It's a good lesson for all the girls. They have to really be able to defend their real women's liberation position. This is the real women's liberation movement. In the material world, there's no such thing as women's liberation. Because there's no such thing as liberation. Just by the very fact that there's no such thing as liberation, then there must immediately be bondage. Women's liberation is a very great plot. Prabhupada used to describe it as the plot of the men and the communists. I think Prabhupada used to describe it as the plot of the men. I described it as the plot of the communists. The plot of the men is, okay, you are now liberated, so you can dance on the tables naked. You're liberated. You can do whatever you want. So now do that. And now you're liberated. You can kill the child in the womb. After all, we men exploit you to the maximum. Because we have no responsibility, you see. So you're the one who gets the baby. So now you can have the abortion. You're liberated. You're equal. You can choose. And the communist plotted it. You're liberated, so you should work like an ass all day long. Just like the men do. You can go to the army too. You're equal. You can drive a truck. You're equal. You can dig a ditch. You're equal. They should go to India and find out where the culmination of that is. When they see all the women carrying pots of dirt on their heads. All day long in the hot blazing sun. They're equal. Is that really what they want? The modern women liberationists? No, they don't think like that. They think we're equal to get fame, recognition, position. But they don't think, well, then you're also equal to carry a pot of dirt on your head. You're also equal to dig a ditch. You're also equal to slave in a factory all day and do all these things. Is that the kind of equality you want? Okay. Take it. Especially in the communist countries. All the women, they do all the dirty work, and all the men, they go to the army. Very interesting point. And in some places, the women also go to the army and fight and shoot and kill. And thus the whole family tradition is broken down completely and utterly and totally, and the whole societies are going to hell. In the same so-called liberated places where women are so-called liberated, the divorce rate is over 50%. The suicide rate is over 30%. The children are growing up to be complete nonsenses. So is this very good society? With so-called liberated women? No. Now, if you want to be a really liberated woman, you have to come here. Because only here is there liberation available. Liberation from the body. Therefore, you're no longer considered as woman or man, or black or white, or young or old, or fat or skinny, or whatever. These things don't consider. We don't count like that. We count whoever is qualified, whoever is capable, whoever's got the quality, they can accept the position. There's no lacking in that regard. If you've got the qualification, you accept the position. So all our girls should learn the philosophy very carefully also. So they'll be able to present really why this is the women's liberation movement. Why there's real equality in Krishna consciousness movement. That is very much required. Otherwise, then, you'll not be able to prove your status as the liberated movement. Simply by proclaiming a mundane philosophy, nobody's going to believe it. We're going to judge by the results. And what are the results? You can present the Krishna conscious philosophy and perform Krishna conscious service equal to or better than any of the others. That's my challenge. That's why I'm always making jokes between Yogendra and Annapurna, because she beats him all the time. So I'm talking about how this is the real women's liberation here. You see? She can actually proclaim. Of course, that also makes havoc in the family life. Because if the woman is not, by her intelligence, understanding the nature of the man, then he cannot tolerate being second-rate. I'm not being personal right now, I'm just trying to give the philosophy. That the man cannot tolerate being second-rate. If the man is always being beaten by the woman in all respects, you can guarantee there's going to be a divorce. Because he can't stand it. Can't stand being beaten all the time. You see that all the time. So the woman has to be very clever, to have to be very humble and meek before the husband, so that he feels like he's the greater. And the woman can think of it from the point of view of superior intelligence. If she wishes that she's superior, and she can think, because I have a superior intelligence, I will make him think he's more intelligent. Then he will be very happy, and the family life will be very peaceful. And the men will also be very happy. Everything will be very peaceful. There's a very great psychological, deep understanding in this Varnashram society. Very deep understanding of the relative psychology. In fact, there was a wonderful book just written by a man who proved anthropologically and sociologically how any culture which became dominated by a woman's liberation movement was destroyed within 3 generations. Within 3 generations, the culture destroyed itself. Because the women, when they became dominant and took over the society, the men became very violent and made wars and destruction and ultimately started to kill and eat the women. A wonderful book. It's incredible. And also, I can tell you very frankly, from personal experience, in Russia, where the women have become so dominant in the society, the men have become very violent also. There's initially, I tell you exactly how it happens. Initially, there is a period of docility, when the women take over and the men just sit back and say, great, they're doing all the work. Then, too much of this nothingness in the men, it makes them very frustrated. And then gradually their motive passion begins to develop. And then from frustration comes anger. And at that point of anger, they start making wars and violence and destruction, and they kill each other off in the society. And they attack the women, because they attack the women to take over their position of superiority by force. So therefore, if women actually had some intelligence, they would never try to attain that position, because it means the destruction of their race. Many races have become extinct because of this. I wanted to get that book and bring it. In Sweden it would be some real hit, huh? People, they don't think about this. Don't think about this. But the Varnashram society is very intelligent how to properly understand the positions of everybody and create an atmosphere where their psychological defects or requirements are best taken care of. Very intelligent system, because it comes from Krishna. It has to do with the real nature of people. Anyway. Left you here long enough. Your name is Labangalatika Dana.
Yeah.
All the women are Devi Dasi. Labangalatika Devi Dana. phone. This is for Erica who's not here. Okay. But maybe I should just, no. Should I announce her name? I don't know. This is a new thing that you're initiating somebody who's not sitting at the fire sacrifice.
Maybe she should, at least she will let us use the trust.
Okay. Save me there. And Mark and Day, you can just run up to my room as soon as we finish here. Alright, go on. From now on, everybody, From now on, everybody should realize that I'm going to be asking you all kinds of questions. I'm not just going to sit back here and be the one who gets people ask questions to all the time. I'm going to ask you questions. And you better be ready for it. Come up with some good answers. It's like in Boston. I said, why should I initiate you? I don't see any reason why I should initiate you. You explain to me why I should initiate you. So you better be ready for any questions.
Hare